The thunderous roar of the engines shattered the midnight quiet. Private Jack Sullivan felt the fuselage trembling beneath his boots as the half-track lurched into gear, kicking up mud and shards of broken glass. Just hours ago, he had been a bank clerk in Chicago. Now he was hurtling toward a firefight in the Ardennes forest that would test everything he believed about heroism, loyalty, and what it really means to endure. Across the Atlantic, Lieutenant Maya Thompson stared at the map on the cabin wall of her transport plane over New Guinea. She tightened her grip on the edge of the chart. Her mission wasn't glamorous. It was delivering medical supplies to soldiers who had already seen more horror than most expect in a lifetime. And yet what she would do in the next 48 hours would ripple far beyond the jungle, changing the course of one man's fate and shattering the illusion that war is ever clean. Two very different theaters, two individuals whose stories would collide in an unexpected way. What no one told them, what the textbooks reject, is how one small act of mercy, one unexpected gesture of defiance, can shift the momentum of a war. Here is the hidden story of how fate whispered in the rubble of Europe and the jungles of the Pacific, and how one American soldier, one American nurse, found themselves at the pivot point. Part 1. Before the Storm. Approximately 5,000 words. Introduction of protagonists. Jack Sullivan, a bank clerk from Chicago, living a quiet life, volunteering for the U.S. Army after Pearl Harbor. Maya Thompson, a Red Cross-affiliated nurse from Seattle, determined to serve despite doubts from family and friends about her going overseas. Setting the scene. The United States in early 1942, the home front, rationing, enlistments, the shifting mood among Americans. The broader war theaters, a brief orientation of the European and Pacific fronts, highlighting how far-flung and vast the conflict is. Their enlistment and training. Jack's induction, basic training, his thoughts, fears, camaraderie, mission briefing pointing toward Europe. Maya's journey, nursing school, wartime recruitment, her sense of purpose, assignment to the Pacific. Foreshadowing the convergence. Jack receives orders to join a unit bound for the Ardennes region. Maya is assigned to a medical supply flight for the Pacific Jungle Campaign. An ominous hint. Both will face moments where the war becomes intensely personal, not just duty. Part 2. The Edge of Chaos. Approximately 10,000 words. Jack trips into combat. Arrival in Europe, bitter cold, trench lines, tension. First firefight, shock of battle, witnessing death, and surviving. The Ardennes offensive builds, winter 1944 to 1945. Jack's unit is caught in the maelstrom. Some facts: extreme winter conditions, surprise German attack. Maya enters the Pacific maelstrom. Maya lands in New Guinea, or some jungle locale. The relentless heat, humidity, diseases, supply lines stretched thin. Her mission is delivering medical goods, treating wounded, improvising in a remote airstrip. Parallel trials. Jack freezing in Europe, watching friends fall, getting wounded or close to it, questioning his resolve. Maya amid the mosquitoes, malaria, jungle storms, treating American, Allied, and even some local Allied forces wounded. The war's cruelty and the flickers of humanity. A captured German soldier, a friendly local villager, sharing food, brief kindnesses. Turning point for each. Jack's unit becomes isolated, cut off from supply, confronted with a moral dilemma: orders versus saving wounded. Maya's aircraft is damaged, forced to land in jungle. She must survive while still caring for others. Part 3. Collision of Worlds. approximately 15,000 words. Unseen theaters and deception. Introduce a lesser-known operation for U.S. readers like the Ghost Army, U.S. Army Tactical Deception Unit in Europe. Show how deception, intelligence, logistics behind the front lines are essential. Jack becomes briefly involved in such deception or hears about it. Maya's jungle odyssey turns catastrophic. The plane crash forces Maya to trek with wounded men, encountering local resistance fighters, Japanese patrols, nature's fury. She must choose, carry on into enemy territory to find help, or staying and covering wounded. Wings of Hope is available to contact through radio. Jack's moment of reckoning. During the Ardennes push, Jack's small platoon is ordered into a defensive posture. German tanks bear down. He must lead fellow soldiers in a desperate action. He experiences fear, doubt, but also leadership, courage. Parallel reflection and internal change. Both protagonists reflect on home, letters from family, memories of civilian life, the war changing them. They each encounter friendly fire of a kind, missed orders, miscommunications, the fog of war. Convergence hint. Perhaps Maya's rescue plane is assigned to pick up wounded from European theater after Pacific. Jack is among them, or via correspondence they share mutual friend, connection element bridging theaters. A subtle link, a photograph, a supply crate marked with the same serial number, a fellow soldier who served in both theaters. Part 4. The Turning Tide. Approximately 10,000 words. Jack in the final push in Europe. The war is winding down. The Allies advance. Jack's unit participates in a major offensive, crossing the Rhine, entering Germany. He witnesses concentration camps, civilian survivors, reshaping his understanding of why the war matters. Maya returns to action in the Pacific's final phase. With Allies inching toward Japan, Maya is part of a massive medic evacuation operation, dealing with the wounded from island landings, kamikaze attacks, and the looming atomic shadow. Clash of moral and personal stakes. Jack must make a decision, follow orders into civilian area versus protect innocent villagers. Maya must decide, stay with the front line versus evacuate wounded or children when supply lines collapse. Their stories converge. Both receive orders to return home or to be reassigned. Both reflect on what they've become. They cross paths indirectly. Maybe Jack receives a letter from Maya's friend, or Maya treats a soldier from Jack's old unit. The impact, the war's interconnectedness across oceans. Victory, but at a cost. VE Day and VJ Day. Relief, ugulation, but also loss. Jack returns wounded. Maya returns haunted. They find themselves changed, and the America they left has changed too. Part 5. Aftermath and Reckoning. Approximately 10,000 words. Homecoming. Jack arrives in Chicago, sees the changed city, the new culture. His old job no longer matters. Maya comes back to Seattle, tries to resume civilian life, but the ghosts of the jungle follow her. Reconstruction of self. Jack wrestles with PTSD, survivor's guilt, his sense of purpose. Maya wrestles with purpose, having saved many but lost some. She becomes an advocate for veterans or works in public health. Legacy and memory. How the war shaped U.S. society, women in workforce, racial integration in the military, new global role for the U.S. Both protagonists attend a veterans reunion or visit a memorial in Normandy or Pacific Theater. They meet others who tell their stories. Reflection on freedom and sacrifice. Jack gives a speech at a high school about never forgetting. Maya helps with medical missions or records veterans' oral histories. They each realize that war isn't just about battles, it's about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. Closing scene. Jack and Maya, separated by distance but linked by experience, look out at the Atlantic or Pacific from shores where their theaters began, reflecting on what they fought for, what they lost, and what hope remains. Final line. We won the war, but the real victory will be what we build in peace.
Additional notes and research guidelines. Historical accuracy. Use genuine wartime details, unit names, equipment, half-tracks, Sherman tanks, amphibious craft, dates, for example, Ardennes offensive, December 1944, locations, Normandy hedgerows, Pacific jungles. Lesser-known angles. Include stories of deception units like the Ghost Army in Europe, remote jungle campaigns, logistics, medical evacuation, home front impact. This enriches for U.S. readers who know the major events, but less the lesser-told ones. Themes: duty versus self, sacrifice, identity before and after war, brotherhood/fellowship across oceans and ranks, moral ambiguity, the cost of freedom. Structure: 5 parts, as above, give clear narrative arcs. Ordinary world, to conflict intensifies, to midpoint collision, to resolution of war, to aftermath and meaning. Length distribution. With about 50,000 words total, allocate roughly Part 1 equals 5K, Part 2 equals 10K, Part 3 equals 15K, Part 4 equals 10K, Part 5 equals 10K. Tone. Accessible and vivid. Include visceral descriptions, cold Ardennes, jungle humidity. Dialogue that feels authentic but not anachronistic. Pacing that alternates action with reflection. Hook repetition. You might open each major part with a short prologue from Jack's or Maya's point of view to keep readers engaged. Part 1. Before the Storm. 1. The Ordinary Lives. Chicago, spring 1942. Jack Sullivan's fingers hovered over the ledger in the small bank on South Street. The sun filtered through the tall windows, casting long, rectangular shafts of light across the mahogany desks. He double-checked the entries. Mr. Thompson's mortgage payment, Mrs. Bryant's savings deposit, balanced, routine, safe. Jack had grown up in a neighborhood of modest houses and second-shift steel mill workers, but by now he had settled into the comfort of an orderly life. He'd taken small risks, the new car on installment, the Sunday drive to Lake Michigan, a weekly radio program with his fiancée Evelyn, but all within known bounds. The world to him was manageable. Seattle, summer 1942. Maya adjusted the white cap on her nurse's uniform, smoothing the brim before the mirror. Her reflection showed a woman eager, nervous, resolute. The sound of a streetcar clanging outside of Harbor Avenue mingled with distant ship horns in the harbor. She inhaled the salty air. She had finished nursing school at the war's demand and joined the Red Cross Overseas Service. Evelyn had waved goodbye, their embrace lingering longer than usual. The letters from home were steady. Her younger brother Pete was working in the shipyard, her mother reminding her to get enough sleep. But Maya felt a pull, something bigger than herself, to go where she could help beyond the hospitals at home. She had volunteered for overseas deployment. Evelyn had clasped her hand and said, "Be safe." Maya smiled, but inside, she wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. 2. The home front. Across the United States, the war had entered every household. Rationing, war bonds, scrap metal drives. Jack listened to the news on the radio, reports of Guadalcanal, the U-boat menace in the Atlantic. He felt proud but distant, as though the war were someone else's. Yet after the attack on Pearl Harbor, he had enlisted. He told himself He was ready for anything. His training at Fort Knox felt like boot camp in a new world. Physical strain, drill sergeants, the old life receding. Maya saw a different home front shift. Women entering factories, the docks busy with supplies for the Pacific. At night, she studied military-style maps of the islands where the fighting was worst. She wondered what it would look like, the jungles, the heat, the wounded. She had volunteered for overseas deployment. Evelyn had clasped her hand and said, "Be safe." Maya smiled, but inside, she wasn't sure what safe meant anymore. 3. Enlistment and training. Jack arrived at the training camp just as dawn crept across the fields. He met Sergeant Reed, a veteran of the Philippine campaign, who barked orders with a clipped voice. Jack's first march, the rain-soaked drill, the repeated runs through obstacle courses, all demanded he shed his former clerk identity and become a soldier. He learned to fire the M1 Garand, to move with a squad, to trust the man on his left. He thought of his bank ledger, of clients and balances, and wondered how long that life would matter. Maya's training was different, but no less demanding. In a makeshift military hospital near her base, she practiced tending wounded, sometimes reenacting landing zone trauma. She had to learn to treat battle injuries, tropical diseases, malnutrition. She and several other female nurses were briefed on deployment to the Pacific Theater. The briefing officer told them, "You'll be on the move. You'll be where the line of supply is thin. Expect malaria. Expect heat. Expect worse." Maya inhaled deeply, the weight of those words settling on her. 4. The order and the boundary shift. As Jack's convoy rolled toward the coast in Europe, rumors of German counteroffensives whispered in mess halls. He sensed that the war would not just be a matter of maneuvering on maps, but of survival, of choice. And in the Pacific, Maya's first night under foreign stars, listening to the croak of frogs and distant engines, she thought, "Nothing I've done at home has prepared me for what's next." Little did they know that their paths, though oceans apart, would eventually converge. That in the chaos of war, one act of compassion, one moment of decision could resonate far beyond the ground beneath a boot or the wing of a plane. End of Part 1. This portion sets the stage, two protagonists, their civilian roots, the shift into war, and the beginning of their divergent journeys. If you like this, I'll proceed to Part 2, The Edge of Chaos, where Jack enters combat in Europe and Maya confronts the jungle in the Pacific. Would you like me to start Part 2 now, or would you prefer adjustments to Part 1, tone, style, level of detail, first? Part 2, The Edge of Chaos. 1. Jack enters the fray. Jack Sullivan stepped off the transport at the gray light of dawn, boots crunching on frost-hard ground. His breath puffed white against the cold European morning. He had heard the talk of the Ardennes region, but nothing quite prepared him for the forested hills blanketed in early snow, the muted roar of distant artillery, and the sense of waiting. His unit, part of a newly arrived infantry company, was posted along a ridge road winding through the forest. The orders were straightforward: hold the line, push forward when the time came. But the minutes melted into hours of uncertainty. He traded glances with his closest friend among the squad, Corporal Martinez, whose face looked pinched with fatigue even before bullets flew. Then came the explosion. Almost simultaneously, the ground shook and shells screamed in. The Germans had launched an attack in the region. Battle of the Bulge, the Ardennes offensive, had begun. Jack's training, once distant and theoretical, snapped into reality. He found himself sprinting between foxholes, slamming magazine after magazine into his M1 Garand, scanning snow-darkened trees for movement. One moment he was that quiet Chicago bank clerk. The next,
He was doing the work of a soldier, not just obeying orders, but reacting, improvising, surviving. 2. First combat, first losses. The fighting was brutal. In the pre-dawn gloom, German artillery opened with thousands of rounds, exactly as historical accounts recall. At 5:30 a.m. on 16 December 1944, well before dawn, the German guns opened fire. Jack watched as the forest became a maelstrom of sound and color, shells detonating among trees, branches splintering, the acrid smell of cordite and snow mixing in the air. In one scramble for cover, Martinez fell beside him, hit by shrapnel. Jack dragged him into a shell crater shelter, bound the wound with trembling hands. The veranda of home was gone. He realized then that this was no drill. 3. Maya's jungle baptism. Half a world away, Maya Thompson's journey was equally stark. The transport plane landed on a rough airstrip in New Guinea, moss and vines creeping toward once cleared tarmac, the humidity thick like wet wool, the cries of insects and distant thunder of aircraft echoing. She unpacked crates of medical supplies, morphine syringes, sulfa powder, stretchers, bandages, and stepped into a field hospital set up under tarps and corrugated iron sheds. Wounded U.S. soldiers, Australian allies, even local Papuan fighters arrived by jeep and litter. Maya's training didn't fully prepare her for the smell. Gangrene, tropical infections, blood-soaked uniforms, exhaustion. She treated a young infantryman who had lost part of his leg to a shell fragment. His eyes were wide, and he asked if he'd ever see Chicago again. Maya didn't know the answer. The jungle around seemed indifferent as life and death played out in the dim lamplight of the tent. 4. Parallel trials. Jack's days became a blur of cold, hunger, gunfire. The Ardennes terrain, more than 4,000 square miles of hills and ridges thickly forested, meant movement was slow. Roads clogged with vehicles, artillery, pack horses struggling in snow. Supplies lagged. He and his squad watched as German tanks and infantry punched gaps in the lines, then got bogged in snow-clogged roads. The enemy's surprise offensive nearly overwhelmed them. At the same time, Maya's challenges were of a different but equally deadly sort. Tropical storms, malaria, rail-thin supply lines, jungle paths where the wounded had to be carried by stretcher for miles. She found herself improvising, using local plants for makeshift antiseptics, enlisting Papuan porters, rigging rain-soaked field dressings. At night, the mosquito buzz was relentless. Dawn brought new casualties. Both felt the sameness of it. The war wasn't heroic parades. It was cold sweat, fear, exhaustion, more waiting than action. And when action came, it was messy and chaotic. 5. A turning point for each. For Jack, after that patrol, when his wounded corporal died despite his efforts, he realized he couldn't remain passive. He approached his sergeant and volunteered to lead a supply run through a known German flank. His rationale: if they don't get what they need, we don't hold. He wasn't just obeying orders, he was shaping them. For Maya, after the crash landing, she made the call to leave the safety of the airstrip and press ahead into the jungle to save the wounded, instead of waiting for full evacuation backup. That decision cost time, energy, but saved lives. She acknowledged that in war, she was not only nurse, but navigator, porter chief, morale keeper. They both changed inside. Jack's view of war shifted from duty to ownership. Maya's from idealistic service to gritty persistence. Their inner monologues grew dark with thoughts of home. Jack fantasized about the bank ledger, about Chicago's warmth. Maya about the quiet harbor in Seattle just for one evening. But the war would not let them stay there. 6. Foreshadowing their collision. In Europe, Jack's unit intercepted intelligence of fake Allied formations, stories of the Ghost Army creating illusions to mislead German commanders. This gave him a sense of how war's shape wasn't always where the bullets flew. Sometimes it was where the enemy thought they would fly. In the Pacific, Maya's supply crates bore markings that read, U.S. Army, Europe, Advanced Depot. She paused at the crate and thought, if they're shipping from Europe to here, then all our fights are linked. The two ocean-separated individuals had no idea how close their threads already were. Somewhere, in some way, the patient Maya helped and the wounded soldier Jack carried would share the same story. The war's network spanned continents, and soon their theaters would shrink, converge, collapse into one horizon.
11. Jack's Crossroads. The snow had stopped falling, but the forest remained a hell of white, broken branches and frozen ridges. Jack Sullivan's once clear world of bank ledgers and urban quiet now felt unreal, a memory of someone else. On the morning of December 26, 1944, his squad was ordered into the woods near Bastogne to hold a flank of the German advance. The landmark date marks one of the turning points of the Battle of the Bulge. Encyclopedia Britannica. The terrain worked against them. Roads choked with abandoned vehicles, tanks stuck in icy gullies. No clear front, only a line of tension. Jack's sergeant told him, "We're up against everything. The Germans, the cold, the roads. Supplies are thin." The men racked the crates of ammo and grub and found more missing than expected. One afternoon, a shell exploded nearby, and Jack found himself kneeling beside a wounded rifleman named Parker, bleeding from the hip. Jack steadied his breath, ripped open his pack, and used the field dressing he had learned in training. Parker's eyes were unfocused. He whispered something about his home in Indiana, his mother waiting. Jack squeezed his hand, thought of his fiancée Evelyn back in Chicago, and felt the weight of survival pinch him. The next morning, Jack volunteered for a supply run through a wooded ravine that intelligence flagged as lightly held by the enemy. No glamour, no parade, just a half-track filled with ammo, rations, and medical supplies. They crawled through snow, the half-track wheels spinning in frozen mud, every crunch of branch a potential ambush. At one point, a German patrol loomed ahead. Jack's heart thundered. He motioned his driver to stop, and together they edged past the enemy, mere feet away, until they cleared the kill zone into a clearing marked by friendly signs. Back at camp, Jack realized he had changed. No longer the bank clerk obeying instructions, but a soldier making small but vital decisions, choosing to move, to act, to risk. He looked at his reflection one evening in the half-track's broken windshield and barely recognized the man staring back. 12. Maya's Jungle Descent. Meanwhile, in the Pacific realm, Maya Thompson found her mission growing more complex by the hour. They had been relocated to a forward airstrip in New Guinea, where conditions were brutal and budgeted for survival rather than comfort. The humidity pressed on her skin, the air thick with mosquito hum and insect cries, the scrub and vines closing in. On a rainy morning, the transport plane she was supporting came in with wounded from a landing beach assault. One of them, an Australian sergeant named Collins, had multiple shrapnel wounds and a collapsed lung. Maya assisted in setting up a triage area beneath a tarpaulin, rain beating down, lightning occasionally flashing through the jungle canopy. The smell of antiseptic clashed with damp earth. Flies hovered over open wounds, and the wounded cried out in their sleep. Later that afternoon, the transport plane she had helped load was hit by Japanese ground fire while landing. The left engine stalled, the plane skidded, the propeller clipped a tree. Arbitrary. Maya and other medics scrambled to unload stretchers, the wounded scattered across the red rust soil. They carried the wounded away on bamboo stretchers into the jungle, wading through streams swollen by heavy rain, vines slapping legs, boots slipping.
At one crossing, the water surged over their ankles. Maya clutched a wounded private's hand and reminded him, "Keep breathing, we're almost out." That night, in the hammock under the mosquito net, Maya whispered a letter in her mind to her younger brother Pete in the shipyard back in Seattle. She tried to recall the summer nights before the war, the sea breeze on the harbor, the quiet of home. But the jungle had rewritten her hours. The cry of insects, the drip of tarpaulin, the distant rumble of aircraft overhead. She wondered, who was she now? Nurse? Soldier? Survivor? 13. Moral collisions and convergence. Both Jack and Maya faced moral turning points. Jack, after rescuing Parker and others, confronted his sergeant one night. "We're losing men because supplies can't reach us. I'll take the next run." The sergeant hesitated, but nodded. Jack's acceptance raised murmurs in his squad, from fear to respect. He realized war was no longer just doing what he was told, it was about doing what must be done. Maya likewise made a bold decision. She suggested moving the next day's medical evacuation ahead of schedule, even though vehicles were delayed and the jungle path unconfirmed. Her commanding officer looked at her map of the crisscrossing jungle trails and asked if she was sure. Maya's voice didn't waver. The wounded can't wait for perfect logistics. They went, across river crossings, under fire, and reached a makeshift airstrip where the waiting plane took off just as Japanese bombers roared overhead. Maya exhaled only after the plane was airborne. Meanwhile, Jack's squad received whisperings of the covert unit 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, the Ghost Army, that used inflatable tanks and sound trucks to mislead the enemy. National WWII Army.mil. Jack mused, "If they can fool the enemy about where we are, maybe my supply run is less about movement and more about illusion, about hope." The idea resonated. War was not just brute force, it was creative, deceptive, unexpected. On the Pacific side, Maya noticed that many supplies coming in were marked for Europe, Advanced Depot, as though the logistics of war spanned oceans. The separate theaters, she thought, were not separate stories. They were parts of one large machine. She realized that whether in snow or jungle, the same principle applied. Survive, adapt, connect. 14. The height of crisis. For Jack, the crisis peaked when his squad joined an assault on a German strongpoint in the Ardennes. The road ahead was narrow, flanked by woods and riddled with tank tracks frozen over. The men advanced, shells shrieking, trees splintering. Jack's friend Martinez, who had warned him earlier about missing home, was hit by sniper fire. Jack pulled him behind a downed half-track, pressed a field dressing, then saw another shell land near their pair. Dust, glass, the taste of snow-charged air. Jack shouted orders, rallied the remaining squad, and used knowledge of the terrain they had picked up in the forest. Freeze, move, duck. They forced the Germans to withdraw from the strongpoint after fierce combat. But the cost was heavy. 4 of his squad dead, several wounded. Jack sank to his knees behind the half-track, looking at the wreckage and thinking of Evelyn's radio show back in Chicago. The war's toll had become deeply personal. Maya's crisis mirrored and contrasted that of Jack's, but in an ocean and jungle away. Her jungle team, carrying wounded, came upon a Japanese patrol blocking their path. No time to wait. Maya helped lay down suppressive fire she never imagined holding a rifle, while the medics evacuated the wounded. The creek crossing loomed again, now under fire. The wounded stretcher got stuck in the mud. Maya jumped in, pulled up the stretcher, waded the water, encouraged the wounded one by one. The gunfire ceased when the plane roared overhead, picking them up. Maya exhaled, drenched, shaking. She had saved lives, but she had changed.